June 17th, 1944, Saipan. 5 United States Marines are pedaling bicycles through the smoking ruins of Garapan, the island's administrative capital. Japanese soldiers are everywhere, hundreds of them, moving through destroyed buildings, carrying ammunition, shouting orders in a language the 5 Americans do not understand. The Marines are not hiding, they are not sneaking, they are riding casually down what used to be the main street, weaving between rubble piles and bomb craters like they own the place, like they belong here, like they are not 5 enemy combatants cycling through the heart of an Imperial Japanese staging area surrounded by thousands of troops who would tear them apart if they realized the truth. One of the cyclists, a 23-year-old from Louisiana named Jack Devereaux, feels his heart hammering so hard he thinks the Japanese soldiers 10 feet away must be able to hear it. Sweat runs down his face, but he does not wipe it away. That would look nervous. Nervous draws attention, so he keeps pedaling, keeps his face neutral, keeps breathing. A Japanese officer waves at them. Devereaux lifts one hand from the handlebars, waves back. The officer turns away, shouting something to his men. Devereaux's hand is shaking when he puts it back on the handlebar. He is 23 years old. 3 months ago, he was in a military prison. Now he is cycling through an enemy capital, mapping positions that will save thousands of American lives. These 5 men have no business being alive. They are criminals, thieves, brawlers, men who broke the law, broke regulations, broke other men's jaws in barroom fights. The Marine Corps pulled them from the brig 3 months ago and gave them a choice: die in prison or die in combat. 40 men chose combat. By the time this story ends, 12 will be dead, 9 will be wounded. The rest will spend 66 years haunted by what they saw, what they did, what they survived. But on this afternoon in June 1944, 5 of them are riding stolen Japanese bicycles through Garapan, acting like they belong, gathering intelligence that will change the entire battle for Saipan. How did criminals become the most elite reconnaissance unit in the Pacific? Why did the Marine Corps forget them for 66 years? And what happened on Saipan that changed modern warfare forever? This is the story of the 40 Thieves, the scout sniper platoon the Corps tried to bury, the men who proved that breaking every rule could save everyone's life. But that bicycle ride through enemy territory, that was not even their most dangerous mission. 3 days earlier, they faced something worse: 37 Japanese tanks, and they had exactly 36 rockets. If you want to see how underdogs, outcasts, and rule breakers created modern American special forces, if you want to know why Navy SEALs owe their existence to 40 criminals from a Marine brig, stay with me. Because this story has never been told like this before, hit that like button right now. It helps YouTube show forgotten stories like this to people who need to hear them. And subscribe, because we are bringing you untold history every single day. Now let me take you back to where this really started. February 1944, Camp Tarawa, Hawaii, inside a military prison. First Lieutenant Frank Tukovsky stood in the doorway of the brig looking at 42 men who represented everything the Marine Corps officially despised: thieves, brawlers, men with criminal records, men who could not follow orders, men who in the Corps' official opinion had disgraced the uniform. Tukovsky was 29 years old, from New Brighton, Pennsylvania, an artillery observer, and he was haunted by 17 ghosts. 3 months earlier, November 1943, Tukovsky had been on Tarawa, a tiny coral atoll in the Gilbert Islands. The Marine Corps called it Operation Galvanic. The men who fought there called it hell. Tukovsky's job was simple: call in naval gunfire to support the Marine assault. The Navy had big guns on ships offshore. Tukovsky had maps and a radio. His coordinates would tell those guns where to shoot. Simple, except the maps were wrong. November 20th, 1943, D-Day at Tarawa. 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines was pinned down on the beach. Japanese machine guns cutting them to pieces. Tukovsky radioed for fire support, gave the coordinates from his map. The map intelligence had provided, the map that was supposed to be accurate. 5-inch shells from the USS Maryland screamed overhead. Tukovsky watched them arc through the tropical sky, watched them come down, not on the Japanese positions, on 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. 17 Americans died in 30 seconds, killed by their own Navy, because Tukovsky followed the map he was given, because he trusted official intelligence, because he did what he was trained to do. Among the dead was Corporal Michael Riley, Tukovsky's best friend since basic training. The two of them had enlisted together in Pennsylvania, survived Parris Island together, shipped out to the Pacific together. Riley was going to be the best man at Tukovsky's wedding after the war. There was no court-martial. Technically, it was not Tukovsky's fault. The intelligence was wrong. The maps were bad. These things happen in war. The investigating officer wrote it up as an unfortunate accident, combat fog, no one to blame, but Tukovsky knew different. He stood over Riley's body on that bloody beach and made a promise: never again, never trust the book, never follow rules that get Marines killed. He meant it. Now, 3 months later, Colonel James Risley had given him a chance to keep that promise. After Tarawa cost 994 Marines in just 76 hours, Risley requested permission to form a specialized scout sniper platoon. Better intelligence, he argued, could reduce casualties. If you knew where the Japanese were dug in before the assault, you could hit them with artillery, naval gunfire, airstrikes. You could save lives. The Marine Corps said yes. Risley gave Tchaikovsky command. One order. Build me a unit that does not follow rules. I do not care how you do it. Just bring my boys home alive. Tchaikovsky had a theory. Good Marines follow orders and die. Criminals break rules and survive. He was about to test that theory with 40 men who had nothing left to lose. He walked into the brig. 42 prisoners came to attention. Some looked defiant. Some looked curious. All of them looked hard. These were not men who broke under pressure. Prison had not broken them. Poverty had not broken them. Violence had not broken them. They were still here, still standing. Tchaikovsky did not waste time with speeches. He just told them the truth. The Marine Corps calculates scout sniper casualties at 73%. 3 out of every 4 of you will die. You will operate alone behind enemy lines. No support, no rescue if captured. The Japanese do not take prisoners. They torture, then execute. You have 2 choices. Stay in this brig and go to Leavenworth after the war, or volunteer for combat duty with my platoon. You have 10 seconds to decide. He looked at his watch, started counting. 40 men stepped forward. 2 stayed behind. History would prove cruel irony. The 2 who stayed survived the war. Of the 40 who volunteered, 12 would die, 9 would be wounded, 19 would carry psychological scars for the rest of their lives. But in that moment, standing in that brig in February 1944, those 40 men made a choice: prison or purpose. They chose purpose. Among them was Private Jack Devereaux, 23 years old, from Baton Rouge. He was in the brig for attacking a lieutenant who made racist comments about his Creole heritage. Devereaux had grown up in Louisiana Bayou country, learned to fight in New Orleans street brawls where you fought dirty or you lost. Tchaikovsky gave him a test. Show me how you would kill a sentry silently. Devereaux demonstrated a perfect rear naked choke. Applied correctly, it cuts off blood to the brain. The target loses consciousness in 8 seconds. Dies in 30 if you do not release. Devereaux had learned it in bare-knuckle fighting rings where men bet their paychecks on who could stay standing. Why are you volunteering? Tchaikovsky asked. Devereaux looked him straight in the eye. Spent my whole life being told I am swamp trash, not American enough, not white enough, not good enough. Maybe I die proving I am something more. Tchaikovsky nodded. That kind of anger could be useful, if it was pointed in the right direction. Private Patrick Sullivan was 19, from Boston. Everyone called him Red because of his hair. He was in the brig for stealing Navy supplies. But when Tchaikovsky read the report, he learned Red had been stealing food to feed starving Filipino civilians. The Navy did not care about context. Theft was theft. Red's father had been an Irish immigrant, worked the Boston docks as a longshoreman, broke his back loading ships so rich men could get their imported wine. When he got too slow, they threw him away, fired him at 54. He died 2 years later, penniless. My old man told me one thing before he died. Red said, do not let the bastards win. Every Japanese I kill, every Marine I save, that is me proving Pop was worth something. Tchaikovsky understood that too, proving the system wrong, proving that the men the system threw away were worth more than the system wanted to admit. Corporal Eddie Kowalski was 27, from Chicago, former amateur boxer, had worked as a bodyguard for Polish mob. He was in the brig for a bar fight that sent 3 shore patrol to the hospital. The Corps gave him 6 months. Tchaikovsky asked him the same question. Why volunteer? Eddie's answer was simple. War is my only shot at a clean slate. I am already damned. Might as well be damned doing something that matters. These were not monsters. They were broken men given one last chance. Tchaikovsky did not recruit them because they were criminals. He recruited them because they had survived circumstances that would have destroyed normal people, and survival was the only skill that mattered in the hell they were about to enter. Camp Tarawa, February through May 1944. 6 months of training regular Marines never received. Silent killing, how to approach a sentry from behind, how to break a neck without making a sound, knife work from angles that left no chance for the target to cry out, choking techniques that cut off air and blood simultaneously, precision shooting, M1903, Springfield rifles with 8 times unertl scopes. These were not standard issue. Tchaikovsky had to steal them from a Navy sniper program. At 600 yards, his men could put a round through a man's chest. First shot, every time. Japanese tactics. How the enemy defended islands, where they positioned machine guns, mortars, observation posts. How to read terrain the way the Japanese did. How to predict where they would dig in, artillery coordination. How to call in naval gunfire. How to read maps. How to adjust strikes when the first rounds missed. How to talk to Navy gunners who thought Marines were idiots. And one more skill the Marine Corps did not officially teach. Theft. The Marine Corps was the poorest equipped branch of the American military in 1944. They got surplus World War I weapons, outdated equipment, inadequate rations. To survive, Marines stole from better supplied Army and Navy units. It was an open secret. Everyone did it. Tchaikovsky's criminals excelled. They raided Army supply depots for food, Navy warehouses for equipment. One night, they stole 6 Jeeps, repainted them marine green, and returned them to the motor pool like they had been there all along. The motor pool sergeant never figured it out. Other Marines in the 6th Regiment started calling them the 40 Thieves. It was not a compliment at first, but the thieves wore it like a badge of honor. They were criminals. They knew it. Everyone knew it. Might as well own it. Week 4 of training, night exercise. Red Sullivan stole a case of whiskey from the officers' club. That night, the 40 Thieves sat in their barracks, passing the bottle, sharing stories. Private Danny O'Brien was the youngest. He claimed to be 18. He was actually 16. Lied to the recruiter. The recruiter knew, but did not care. The Corps needed bodies. Danny broke the silence. His voice was quiet. I told my mom I was going to make something of myself, but the truth is my stepfather was beating her. I could not protect her. I thought the Marines would make me a man. The barracks went silent. These were hard men, men who did not talk about feelings, but they all understood what Danny was saying. They had all been powerless once. They all knew what it felt like to be too weak to protect someone you loved. Eddie Kowalski spoke up. His voice was rough, but not unkind. You became a man the day you chose to protect someone weaker than you. Age does not matter. What matters is you are here. Tukovsky had been standing in the doorway, listening. He stepped into the light. Every man in this platoon is here because someone told them they were not good enough, too poor, too violent, too criminal. But I see fighters, I see survivors, and when we hit that beach, you are going to show the Corps what criminals can do. That night, the 40 Thieves stopped being inmates forced into service. They became brothers. Week 6. Tukovsky designed the final test. He needed to know if these criminals could actually think under pressure. Fighting dirty in a bar was one thing. Fighting dirty against trained Marines was another. The mission was simple on paper. Infiltrate a mock Japanese village defended by 200 regular Marines, steal 3 flags without being detected, time limit 3 hours, consequence of failure, return to the brig. Red Sullivan came up with the plan. We do not infiltrate. We walk in the front door. The idea was audacious. Steal Marine uniforms from the laundry. 3 teams of 5 would walk into the village as relief guards. The remaining 25 would create a diversion 400 yards away. While the defenders responded to the diversion, the infiltrators would take the flags. It almost worked. But the guards recognized Red. He had stolen from their unit before. They sounded the alarm. Eddie Kowalski did not panic. He started a massive bar fight in the village center. Within 30 seconds, 50 Marines were piling onto each other, throwing punches, creating chaos. While the defenders tried to break up the brawl, Devereaux's team ghosted into the command post. They did not just take the flags, they planted fake intelligence documents. Raid scheduled for tomorrow, 0600 hours. The defenders found the documents, read them, relaxed. They had 24 hours to prepare. The 40 Thieves attacked at midnight, took all 3 flags, kidnapped the commanding officer for good measure. Tukovsky's verdict was simple. You failed the mission I gave you, but you succeeded at the mission that mattered. That is what I need. Rules are for Marines who want to die honorably. I need Marines who want to live dishonorably. The 40 Thieves had passed their final test, May 1944. The training was over. The invasion was coming. Operation Forager. The assault on the Mariana Islands. Saipan would be first, then Tinian, then Guam. The intelligence briefing laid out the facts. Saipan was 14 miles long, 5 miles wide. Mount Tapochau rose 1,554 feet in the center, providing the Japanese with observation posts overlooking every beach. The garrison was estimated at 30,000 Imperial Army and Navy troops, plus thousands of armed civilians. The island was fortified, concrete pillboxes, interconnected trenches, underground bunkers. The Japanese had registered every beach for artillery and mortar fire. They knew exactly where the Americans would land. They were ready. Expected American casualties were 50%. 1 out of every 2 Marines who hit the beach would be killed or wounded. Those were the numbers, cold, mathematical, final. But there was something the intelligence did not know, something that would turn the invasion into a potential slaughter. The 40 Thieves would discover it on their first day behind enemy lines. 37 Japanese tanks. Devereaux was writing a letter home. His handwriting was careful, deliberate. He wrote slowly because he wanted his mother to understand every word. Mama, if you get this, I am already gone. Do not let father blame himself for how I turned out. The Marines made me into something better than a criminal. Tell him I died as something more than swamp trash. He folded the letter, put it in an envelope, addressed it. He would give it to the chaplain before they shipped out. Standard procedure. If he did not come back, the chaplain would mail it. Red Sullivan was not writing. Eddie asked him why. Because if I write my mother and tell her I might not come back, she will know I am scared. And if she knows I am scared, she will be scared. Better she does not know until it is over. Danny O'Brien was writing too. But his letter was different. It was a confession. Dear Mama, I am sorry I lied about my age. I am sorry I left you with him, but I am not sorry I became a Marine. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I am not a boy anymore. I am a man. And men protect the people they love, even from far away. He did not sign it, just folded it, put it away. June 14th, 1944. Transport ship, 12 hours before the landing. Tukovsky stood on deck looking at the dark shape of Saipan on the horizon. Somewhere on that island, 30,000 Japanese soldiers were waiting. They had machine guns, mortars, artillery. They had bunkers and tunnels and positions that had been prepared for months. They were ready to die for their emperor. Tchaikovsky had 40 criminals from a brig. Most of them had never been in combat before. Half of them would probably die in the first week. That was what the statistics said. 73% casualties for scout sniper units. The math was clear. Colonel Risley found him on deck, pulled him aside. What he said next would change everything. Intelligence says Japanese have maybe 12 tanks on Saipan. I have a source, cannot name him, says it is closer to 50. Division will not adjust the battle plan because intelligence is confident. Tchaikovsky understood immediately. This was Tarawa again. Bad intelligence. Marines walking into a slaughter because someone in an office with maps thought they knew better than sources on the ground. Risley continued, your platoon's real mission is not reconnaissance, it is verification. Find those tanks before they find our boys. Because if intelligence is wrong again, Tarawa will look like a picnic. You are sending us because you do not trust official intelligence, Tchaikovsky said. I am sending you because criminals survive when good Marines die. I need survivors because if those tanks attack the beach at dawn, 10,000 Marines die in the first hour. Risley walked away, left Tchaikovsky alone with that weight, 10,000 lives, riding on 40 criminals, on men the Corps had thrown away. Tchaikovsky went to his footlocker, pulled out a photograph, Corporal Michael Riley, smiling, alive. Taken 2 days before Tarawa, before Tchaikovsky's artillery coordinates killed him. I am about to lead 40 men into 73% casualties, Tchaikovsky said to the photograph, to his dead friend, to himself. The math says 29 die. I already killed 17 by following orders. If I kill 29 by breaking them, what does that make me? Red Sullivan appeared beside him. How long he had been standing there, Tchaikovsky did not know. Doing the math, Red asked. Always. Stop. You did not kill 17 at Tarawa. Intelligence did. You are not killing us tomorrow. You are giving us the only chance we have got. Tchaikovsky looked at him. This 19-year-old from Boston, this kid who stole food for starving civilians, this criminal. What if the math catches up? Tchaikovsky asked. Red's answer was simple. Then we make sure the 73% who die take 1,000 Japanese with them. In 12 hours, those 40 criminals would hit the beach at Saipan. In 14 hours, they would be farther inland than any other American unit. In 16 hours, they would discover something that would change the entire battle. And in 36 hours, young Donald Evans would be dead, shot in the chest during the first withdrawal, but nobody knew that yet. On this night, June 14th, 1944, the 40 thieves were still 40 strong, still together, still believing they could beat the odds. The sun was setting over the Pacific. Saipan was a dark shape on the horizon. Somewhere on that island, 30,000 Japanese were waiting. The 40 thieves were ready. June 15th, 1944, 0844 hours. The ramp of the Higgins boat dropped into chest-deep water 300 yards from the southern beaches of Saipan. First Lieutenant Frank Tchaikovsky led his men forward into a wall of noise and violence that would define the rest of their lives. Machine gun fire from the beach kicked up spray all around them. The water was warm, too warm. It took Devereaux 3 steps to realize the warmth was not just tropical ocean, it was blood. American blood mixing with the Pacific. Men were dying in the surf, screaming, falling. The ocean was turning red. A Marine, 5 feet to Devereaux's left, took a round through the throat. Arterial spray. The man's eyes went wide with surprise, then empty. He fell forward into the water, disappeared beneath the surface. Devereaux did not know his name, would never know his name, just another Marine who did not make it to the beach. Mortar rounds started falling. Plumes of water erupted around the assault waves. Shrapnel whined through the air. More men fell. The noise was incredible, overwhelming. Machine guns, mortars, men screaming, officers shouting orders that no one could hear over the chaos. Devereaux could not tell if the screaming was Japanese or American or coming from his own throat. Everything was confusion, terror. The urge to dive under the water and hide was almost overwhelming, but Tchaikovsky was moving forward, Red was moving forward, Eddie was moving forward, so Devereaux moved forward. They reached the beach at 0847 hours, 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. The sand was littered with the dead and dying. Marines crouched behind a low seawall, trying to find cover from the machine gun fire raking the beach. Some men were frozen, paralyzed by fear. Others were trying to help wounded, pulling them to cover, applying bandages with shaking hands. Standard Marine doctrine was to establish a beachhead, consolidate forces, wait for support, dig in and hold. Tchaikovsky had different orders for his platoon. One word shouted over the din of battle: move. The 40 thieves did not stop at the seawall, did not dig in, did not consolidate. They pushed inland immediately, fast, breaking contact with the beach, getting away from the killing zone. By 0930 hours, they had pushed 300 yards inland. Farther than any other Marine unit on the beach, they found themselves alone in enemy territory, dense jungle growth on all sides. Somewhere ahead, 30,000 Japanese soldiers were waiting. Behind them, the sounds of battle were still audible but growing distant. They were behind enemy lines now. No support, no rescue if things went wrong. Just 40 criminals with rifles and a mission. Find the Japanese, report their positions, stay alive. The platoon moved through the jungle in dispersed formation, 50 yards apart, maintaining visual contact through hand signals Tchaikovsky had developed during training. No talking, no unnecessary noise. Every man scanning the terrain for threats. At 10:15 hours, Corporal Billy Mancini spotted something that made him freeze. He raised his fist, the signal to halt. The entire platoon stopped moving, became statues in the jungle, waiting. Mancini pointed. Up ahead, built into the side of a ridge, was a concrete pillbox. The position was perfectly camouflaged with vegetation, almost invisible. But Mancini had seen the firing slit, that narrow rectangular opening where a machine gun barrel would emerge. Tchaikovsky moved up carefully, studied the position through binoculars. Type 92, heavy machine gun, 7-man crew. The pillbox was positioned to cover the valley below, where the 2nd Marine Division would advance later that afternoon. Interlocking fields of fire. Marines advancing through that valley would walk directly into a kill zone. 200 men could die in 90 seconds. The tactical dilemma was immediate and brutal. Destroying the pillbox would save hundreds of Marine lives, but firing a bazooka would reveal the 40 Thieves' position, compromise their reconnaissance mission. The Japanese would know Americans had penetrated this far inland. They would send patrols, tighten security, make the rest of the mission exponentially more dangerous. Tchaikovsky reached his decision in 30 seconds. He looked at Devereaux, pointed at the bazooka. Devereaux nodded. Understood. Eddie Kowalski was the best shooter in the platoon. But Devereaux stepped up first, reached for the bazooka before Eddie could volunteer. Why you? Eddie asked quietly. Devereaux's voice was steady. Because I need to know I can do this. He meant more than just firing a rocket. He meant killing, taking lives, crossing that line that you can never uncross. Devereaux had fought in bars, broken bones, put men in hospitals, but he had never killed anyone. In 23 years, he had never taken a human life. That was about to change. Devereaux positioned himself 80 yards from the pillbox. Red Sullivan loaded the rocket, tapped Devereaux's shoulder, ready. The rest of the platoon provided security, watching the jungle, making sure no Japanese patrols were approaching. 80 yards to the target, the firing slit was maybe 2 feet wide, 12 inches tall. Missing would mean the rocket hit solid concrete and did nothing. The Japanese would know they were under attack. The 40 Thieves would have to fight their way out against superior numbers. Devereaux settled the bazooka on his shoulder, sighted through the crude iron sights, took a breath, let half of it out, squeezed the trigger. The rocket motor ignited with a whoosh that seemed impossibly loud after the silence of the jungle. The projectile streaked across the 80 yards in less than a second, hit the firing slit dead center, disappeared inside the pillbox. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the shaped charge detonated. The explosion was contained within the concrete structure, amplified by the enclosed space. All 7 Japanese crew members died instantly, shrapnel and overpressure and fire consuming them in a heartbeat. Smoke poured from the firing slit. The pillbox was destroyed, silent, no return fire, no survivors. Devereaux stood there, bazooka still on his shoulder, staring at what he had done. 7 men were dead by his hand, 7 human beings who had been alive 10 seconds ago, who had families, mothers, maybe wives, maybe children. Now they were corpses in a concrete tomb. Red Sullivan put a hand on Devereaux's shoulder. His voice was quiet, understanding. You just saved 200 of our boys. Devereaux lowered the bazooka. His hands were shaking. I just killed 7 people. Tchaikovsky spoke up. His tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel, not kind, just honest. You just became a Marine. Before the smoke cleared, the 40 Thieves had already moved 300 yards deeper into the jungle. They left no trace of their presence except the destroyed pillbox. When 2nd Marine Division units advanced through the valley 4 hours later, they encountered no machine gun fire from that ridge. They never knew why. Never knew that 40 criminals had already cleared the path. By noon, the 40 Thieves had identified and mapped 17 Japanese positions, 8 machine gun nests, 4 mortar pits, 3 artillery observation posts, 2 ammunition storage areas. Tchaikovsky radioed the coordinates back to regimental headquarters using encoded transmission protocols. Within 20 minutes, naval gunfire from destroyers offshore began hitting the targets. The 40 Thieves watched from concealed positions as 5-inch shells demolished Japanese fortifications they had marked half an hour earlier. This was their mission: find the enemy, mark them for destruction, move on before the Japanese realized what was happening. The platoon's advance carried them 2 miles inland by early afternoon, well ahead of any other American unit. They moved through terrain the Marines would not reach for 3 more days, and every 100 yards revealed new Japanese positions. The island was more heavily fortified than intelligence had estimated. If this story is making you think of the fathers, uncles, or grandfathers who served in the Pacific, drop a comment and tell us about them. Their service mattered. Their stories matter. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens next when the 40 thieves discover those tanks is going to change everything. At 1540 hours, the platoon discovered something that intelligence had catastrophically underestimated. Devereaux was on point, moving through dense undergrowth. When he saw them through a gap in the vegetation, he froze, raised his fist. The platoon halted. Devereaux raised his binoculars, started counting. His lips moved silently. 1, 5, 10, 15, 20. He kept counting. The number kept climbing. Tchaikovsky moved up beside him, took the binoculars, looked for himself. Under camouflage netting, in a grove north of Cherincanoa, 37 Type 97 medium tanks sat in staging positions, engines cold, crews resting in nearby dugouts but ready to move. Marine intelligence had estimated maybe 12 tanks on the entire island of Saipan. The 40 thieves had just found 37 in one location. Tchaikovsky did the math immediately. His platoon carried 6 bazookas, 6 rockets per bazooka, 36 rockets total, 37 tanks. The numbers were almost perfect. Almost. But numbers were not the real problem. The real problem was tactical. A 40-man unit does not attack a tank battalion. That violates every principle the Marine Corps teaches. Tanks are for other tanks to fight, or aircraft or naval gunfire, not infantry with shoulder-fired rockets. Tchaikovsky radioed headquarters. Enemy tank battalion staging area. Grid coordinates follow. The response came back within 8 minutes. Naval gunfire was already committed to supporting Marine units pinned down near the beach. Airstrikes were engaged on other targets. Artillery was still being unloaded from ships. No assets were available to hit the tank battalion for at least 4 hours. By then it would be dark. The tanks would have moved. The opportunity would be lost. Eddie Kowalski looked at the 37 tanks, looked at his bazooka, did the math. 6 bazookas, 36 rockets. We could do it. Devereaux shook his head. We are a recon unit, not assault. Tchaikovsky was silent, thinking. The choice he made in the next 30 seconds would affect the entire battle for Saipan. Marines on the beach were vulnerable. Supplies were still being unloaded. Artillery positions were being established. If 37 tanks hit the beach head after dark, they could break through Marine lines, reach the supply dumps, destroy everything. Thousands of Marines could die. But attacking the tanks would reveal the 40 thieves' position. End their reconnaissance mission, probably get most of them killed. Rules said wait for support, call it in, let the Navy handle it. But Tchaikovsky had stopped following rules when those rules killed 17 of his men at Tarawa. He was about to give the order to prepare for assault when something changed. At 1625 hours, the Japanese tanks started their engines. The sound of 37 diesel engines roaring to life simultaneously was like thunder rolling through the jungle. Tank crews emerged from camouflage dugouts, climbed onto their vehicles. Officers appeared, shouting orders. Infantry units began forming up around the tanks. This was not a repositioning movement. This was preparation for attack. And it was happening 3 hours earlier than Marine intelligence had predicted. Tchaikovsky checked his watch, 1628 hours. Sunset was at 1912 hours, almost 3 hours away. The Japanese were preparing for a dusk assault. The window for a surprise attack had just closed. The entire enemy force was now alert, organized, ready for combat. Tchaikovsky reached a new decision. His platoon would shadow the tank battalion, track its movements, report real-time coordinates, let Marine units at the beach prepare defenses. It was not as decisive as destroying the tanks, but it was the smart play, the play that kept his men alive. He radioed headquarters. Enemy tank battalion mobilizing for attack. Estimated time of arrival at American lines between 1900 and 2000 hours. The response was immediate. Maintain observation. Do not engage. Continue reporting. The tank battalion began moving at 1707 hours, 2 columns, parallel routes toward the coast. Japanese infantry moved alongside the tanks. Tchaikovsky counted approximately 1,000 soldiers. This was a major assault, not a probing attack. The Japanese intended to break through Marine lines and reach the beaches before nightfall. If they succeeded, they could destroy supply dumps, artillery positions, command posts. The entire American invasion could collapse in a single evening. The 40 thieves split into 4 teams. Alpha team under Tchaikovsky shadowed the main column. Bravo team under Eddie provided flank security. Charlie team under Red conducted forward reconnaissance. Delta team under Billy covered the rear. Every 10 minutes, Tchaikovsky radioed updated coordinates showing the enemy's position and direction of movement. At the beach, Marines began repositioning to meet the threat. Bazookas were distributed to frontline units. Sherman tanks from the 2nd Marine Tank Battalion moved forward. Artillery batteries that had been unloaded adjusted their aim points. The entire 2nd Marine Division prepared to receive a mass tank attack. At 1815 hours, approximately 1 mile from the beach, the Japanese formation halted. Officers gathered for a conference. Tchaikovsky observed through binoculars from 300 yards away. The Japanese were arguing about something, pointing at maps, gesturing toward different directions. The conference lasted 11 minutes. Finally, the officers returned to their units. The formation changed direction. Instead of continuing straight toward the beach, the tanks turned north. Tchaikovsky was surprised. Intelligence maps showed no valuable targets in that direction. But the Japanese clearly had a specific objective. The formation advanced another mile north, then turned west again toward the coast. By 19:05 hours, as the sun touched the horizon, Tchaikovsky understood their plan. The Japanese were not attacking the main beachhead. They were targeting the gap between the 2nd Marine Division and the 4th Marine Division. A successful breakthrough there would split the American forces in half. Tchaikovsky radioed the warning, but the Japanese had chosen their timing perfectly. Dusk was falling. Radio communication became difficult as Marine units shifted frequencies for night operations. Artillery batteries were in the middle of ammunition resupply. Sherman tanks were refueling. The gap between divisions was defended by just 2 Marine companies, approximately 340 men, against 37 tanks and 1,000 Japanese infantry. At 19:23 hours, as darkness settled over Saipan, Tchaikovsky saw something that made his blood run cold. One Type 97 tank had separated from the main formation. It was heading in a different direction, moving through a ravine. Alone, Tchaikovsky traced its projected route on his map. The tank was heading directly toward the 6th Marine Regiment's command post, where Colonel Risley was coordinating the entire divisional response to the Japanese attack. The Type 97 was moving at approximately 15 miles per hour, following a ravine that led directly to the command post location. The Japanese tank commander had identified a weakness in Marine defenses, a 200-yard gap where jungle terrain prevented easy positioning of anti-tank weapons. If that tank reached the command post, it could destroy radio equipment, kill senior officers, paralyze the entire regimental response to the main attack. Colonel Risley and his staff were 400 yards away, completely unaware of the approaching threat. Tchaikovsky had maybe 3 minutes to act. He grabbed Eddie Kowalski, the best bazooka shooter in the platoon. That tank does not reach Risley, whatever it takes. Eddie nodded, grabbed Devereaux as his loader. The two of them moved down the slope at a dead run, racing to intercept the tank before it reached the command post, 400 yards through jungle in near darkness, vines catching their gear, roots threatening to trip them, the sound of the tank engine growing louder. They reached a position 30 yards from the tank's projected path. At 19:31 hours, Eddie dropped prone, aimed the bazooka. Devereaux loaded a rocket, slapped Eddie's shoulder, ready. The tank emerged from the ravine. 20 seconds later, its turret was rotating, searching for targets. The commander stood in the open hatch, scanning the darkness with binoculars. Eddie waited. A moving tank was harder to hit than a stationary one. The side armor was thinnest, but he needed the perfect angle, the perfect moment. The tank continued forward, 25 yards, 20 yards, 15 yards. Then it stopped. The engine idled. The commander was checking his map, trying to confirm his position in the darkness. Eddie fired at 19:32 hours. The rocket hit the tank's left side just below the turret ring, exactly where the armor was thinnest. The shaped charge penetrated, detonated inside the crew compartment. The explosion killed all 4 crew members instantly. 6 seconds later, the tank's ammunition cooked off. The entire vehicle erupted in a fireball that lit up the jungle for 300 yards in every direction. Flames shot 60 feet into the air. The heat was intense even from 30 yards away. Japanese infantry advancing nearby saw the explosion, assumed they had encountered a major Marine defensive position, a line of bazookas, maybe anti-tank guns. They redirected their assault away from the command post, moved toward what they thought was a larger threat. Eddie's single bazooka shot had accomplished more than destroying one tank. It had inadvertently misdirected an entire Japanese infantry battalion away from the most vulnerable point in Marine defenses. The command post remained secure. Colonel Risley continued coordinating the divisional response without interruption. But the bazooka's muzzle flash had revealed Eddie and Devereaux's position to every Japanese soldier within 500 yards. Enemy machine gun fire began raking the area. Mortar rounds started falling. The 2 Marines had to withdraw immediately or risk being overrun. The withdrawal through jungle and darkness while under fire tested everything the 40 Thieves had trained for. Eddie and Devereaux sprinted into the night, branches whipping their faces, bullets snapping through the air around them. They ran for 200 yards before diving into a bomb crater. Lay there gasping, listening to Japanese voices shouting nearby. Organizing search parties, they were separated from the rest of the platoon, alone. 500 Japanese soldiers searching for them in the darkness. Standard procedure called for units to stay together, move as a group, but jungle terrain and enemy fire had made that impossible. The 40 Thieves had split into small teams, moving independently toward predetermined rally points. Japanese patrols were everywhere. At 205 hours, Eddie and Devereaux found themselves lying in undergrowth as a Japanese patrol passed 10 feet away. 7 enemy soldiers with flashlights, searching, calling out to each other. One soldier stopped, looked directly at the spot where Devereaux was hiding. The Marine held his breath, did not move, did not blink. The Japanese soldier stood there for 43 seconds, staring into the darkness. Finally, he moved on. The patrol continued past without detecting the Americans. By 2100 hours, approximately half the 40 thieves had reached the primary rally point, a small clearing 600 yards behind Marine lines. Tuchovsky counted 23 men. 17 were still missing. They could be dead, captured, or simply lost in the darkness. Standard Marine procedure called for units to wait at rally points for up to 2 hours for missing personnel. But the rally point was too close to Japanese positions. Enemy patrols were actively searching the area. Staying would risk the entire group. Tuchovsky reached his decision to move the assembled group back to Marine lines. He would send small rescue teams to search for the missing men after dawn. The group moved toward friendly positions at 21:17 hours. They approached Marine lines carefully. Nervous sentries often shot at anything moving in darkness. Tuchovsky used the pre-arranged recognition signal. 3 short whistles followed by 2 long ones. Marine sentries challenged them. Tuchovsky responded with the correct password. The 40 thieves crossed into friendly territory at 21:41 hours. 23 men had made it back. 17 were still out there somewhere in the dark. Some would make it back on their own. Some would be found by search teams in the morning, and some would never be found at all. The night was not over yet. But for the 23 Marines who had made it back there was a moment to breathe, to drink water, to realize they had survived the first day. Tomorrow they would go back out, search for their missing brothers, continue the mission. But tonight, for a few hours, they were alive. That was enough. June 16th, 1944, first light, Tuchovsky assembled search teams, 4 men per team, orders to locate the missing 17 Marines and return by noon. Each team moved back into the jungle at 0630 hours, retracing the platoon's route from the previous evening. They found the first body at 0705 hours. Private Donald Evans shot twice in the chest, probably during the withdrawal, under fire. Death had been instant. His dog tags were missing. The Japanese often collected American dog tags as trophies. The team buried Evans in a shallow grave, marked it with his rifle and helmet. They would come back for him later, if there was a later. The second team found 3 more bodies at 0820 hours. These Marines had been captured alive. Their hands were tied behind their backs with wire. They had been bayoneted, executed. Among them was young Danny O'Brien, the 16-year-old who had lied about his age to enlist. Japanese forces on Saipan rarely took prisoners. The Imperial Army considered surrender dishonorable and extended that contempt to enemy soldiers who surrendered. But these Marines had not surrendered. They had been wounded, captured, murdered. The search team reported the discovery to Tuchovsky by radio. His voice was flat when he responded, "Continue searching for the remaining men." By 1,000 hours, search teams had located 6 of the missing Marines alive. They had become separated during the night withdrawal, but had successfully evaded Japanese patrols and reached Marine lines at different locations. That brought the count to 33 men accounted for. 7 were still missing. At 11:15 hours, one of the search teams made radio contact. They had found 5 more Marines hiding in a cave system approximately 1 mile behind Japanese lines. The Marines were alive, but pinned down by enemy patrols. They could not move without being detected. Among the 5 was Billy Mancini, the Italian kid from Chicago who had spotted that first pillbox. He had malaria, fever of 103 degrees. Another had dysentery, severe dehydration. They could not survive another 12 hours without medical attention. Tuchovsky faced another decision: request artillery support to create a diversion, safe but slow. It would alert the Japanese to American interest in that specific location, or send a rescue team immediately. Rely on stealth and speed, faster but riskier. He chose speed, assembled a 6-man team: Eddie Kowalski, Red Sullivan, Devereaux, 3 others. They moved out at 11:47 hours. The team reached the cave system at 12:33 hours. The 5 trapped Marines were in bad shape. Billy's eyes were glassy with fever. The dysentery case could barely stand, but they were alive. They had spent the night listening to Japanese patrols pass within yards of their hiding position. The extraction required covering 1 mile through Japanese-controlled territory in broad daylight. Standard tactics called for moving in darkness, but Billy could not survive another 12 hours. The fever was killing him. They moved immediately. 11 Marines, 2 sick men being half-carried, speed over concealment. They made it 400 yards before encountering a Japanese patrol. 20 enemy soldiers in a standard search formation. Tuchovsky had 2 choices: hide and hope the patrol passed, or ambush the patrol and eliminate the threat. Hiding risked discovery. Ambushing risked bringing more Japanese troops to investigate gunfire. He chose ambush. 11 Marines positioned in a classic L-shaped formation, 8 along the patrol's line of march, 3 at the end to catch anyone who tried to escape. The Japanese walked into the kill zone at 13:23 hours. Tuchovsky gave the signal. 11 Marines opened fire simultaneously. The engagement lasted 7 seconds. 20 enemy soldiers killed. No survivors, no radio transmissions. but the gunfire had been heard for at least half a mile. Japanese units throughout the area would be converging on this location within minutes. The Marines moved at a full run, abandoned stealth for speed. Behind them, Japanese voices shouted commands, whistles blew, the sound of enemy units mobilizing. Tuchovsky estimated 5 minutes before Japanese forces surrounded them. The nearest Marine defensive position was 800 yards away across open ground. Running that distance while carrying 2 sick Marines would take at least 12 minutes. The mathematics were brutal. The Japanese would catch them before they reached safety. At 13:29 hours, the terrain dropped into a steep ravine, 40 feet deep with near vertical sides. Going around would add 15 minutes. Going down and back up would slow them significantly. But staying on the ridge meant certain contact with pursuing Japanese forces. Tuchovsky chose the ravine. The Marines descended half sliding and half climbing, supporting the 2 sick men between them. They reached the bottom at 13:33 hours. Japanese soldiers appeared on the ridge above them 60 seconds later. The Japanese opened fire from elevated positions, shooting down into the ravine. Bullets ricocheted off rocks. One Marine was hit in the leg. Another took shrapnel from a grenade that exploded on the ravine floor. The Marines returned fire while continuing to move, using boulders and vegetation for cover. The ravine channeled them in one direction. No tactical options. They could only move forward and hope to reach the far end before the Japanese descended. At 13:38 hours, they saw the problem. The ravine ended in a box canyon, no exit. The Marines were trapped. Japanese soldiers began descending from multiple points, moving to surround them. Tuchovsky counted at least 40 enemy soldiers visible, more arriving every minute. His 11 Marines had maybe 200 rounds of ammunition total. The 2 sick Marines could not fight. That left 9 combat-effective men against a force that was growing rapidly. Then Devereaux noticed something. The box canyon's rear wall was not solid rock. Vegetation growing at the base suggested water seepage, which meant a crack or fissure in the stone. 2 Marines investigated, reported back at 13:44 hours. There was a narrow opening behind the vegetation, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Beyond the opening, the fissure widened into a passageway that appeared to lead upward. The Marines began moving through the opening one at a time, pushing the 2 sick men through first. The passage was tight. Men had to remove their packs and drag them behind. It was completely dark inside. They moved by touch, following the Marine ahead. The passage climbed steeply upward through solid rock. Behind them, they could hear Japanese soldiers entering the box canyon, calling to each other, searching for the Americans who had seemingly disappeared. The passage emerged on the opposite side of the ridge at 14:07 hours, 400 yards from where they had entered. The Marines found themselves behind Japanese lines, but with the enemy focused on searching the ravine below. They moved quickly toward Marine positions, covered the final 600 yards in 8 minutes. They approached friendly lines using proper recognition signals, crossed into American-held territory at 14:23 hours. All 11 Marines reached safety. Billy Mancini and the dysentery case were immediately evacuated to medical stations. That brought the total count to 38 Marines accounted for. 2 remain missing. Both were found dead over the next day, bringing the confirmed killed to 6 with no missing. The 40 Thieves had lost 6 men killed in their first 48 hours on Saipan. That represented a 15% casualty rate in just 2 days. Despite the losses, the platoon had accomplished its mission. They had identified over 200 Japanese positions, called in coordinates that destroyed dozens of enemy fortifications, prevented a tank from reaching the regimental command post, provided critical intelligence on enemy movements. Colonel Risley sent a message at 1800 hours. The 40 Thieves would have 1 night to rest, resupply, and integrate replacements. At dawn on June 17th, they would return to the jungle. This time, their mission would take them even deeper behind enemy lines. The Japanese garrison on Saipan still numbered approximately 29,000 troops. The 40 Thieves now numbered 38 men, counting the 6 replacements who arrived that evening. June 17th, 1944, 0530 hours, the 40 Thieves moved out from Marine lines in complete darkness. Their objective was a ridge system 3 miles inland. Marine intelligence believed it contained Japanese artillery positions. Those guns had been shelling American positions continuously for 2 days, killing Marines, disrupting supply operations. Aerial reconnaissance could not locate the guns because the Japanese had camouflaged them inside caves. Only ground reconnaissance could find them. The mission required penetrating deeper behind enemy lines than any American unit had yet gone on Saipan. They reached the target ridge at 0815 hours. The ridge stretched for approximately 2 miles and rose 600 feet above the surrounding jungle. Japanese positions were everywhere. Tuchovsky counted 8 cave entrances large enough to hide artillery pieces. The caves were connected by tunnels. The Japanese could move guns between positions, fire several rounds, probably sleeping in a different section. Red and Devereaux marked the location on their map, continued deeper. They discovered 2 more guns in the next 40 minutes. plus a command post, an ammunition magazine containing approximately 2,000 rounds, and sleeping quarters for at least 60 soldiers. At 11:03 hours, they heard Japanese soldiers approaching. Red and Devereaux had maybe 15 seconds to find concealment. They pressed themselves into a small alcove, remained motionless as a dozen enemy soldiers walked past. The soldiers passed within 3 feet, conversing in Japanese, completely unaware of the two Americans hiding in the darkness. After the patrol moved on, Red and Devereaux decided to exit the cave system. They had gathered enough intelligence. Staying longer risked capture. They emerged at 11:27 hours, rejoined the platoon. Tchaikovsky examined their map. The tunnel system connected all 8 cave entrances and contained at least 6 artillery pieces. Standard Marine assault tactics would fail against this position. The only solution was to seal the entrances with demolitions, but that required Marine engineers, and those units were still days away. At 12:15 hours, the platoon began moving toward their secondary objective, the town of Garapan, Saipan's administrative capital before the war. Marine intelligence wanted to know if Japanese forces were defending the town or if they had withdrawn to more defensible positions inland. Reaching Garapan required crossing 4 miles of enemy-controlled territory in broad daylight, but the 40 thieves had successfully operated undetected for over 30 hours. Tchaikovsky believed they could complete one more reconnaissance mission before withdrawing to Marine lines. They approached Garapan from the east at 15:40 hours. The town had been heavily bombed by American aircraft and shelled by naval gunfire. Most buildings were destroyed or damaged, but Japanese soldiers were visible moving through the ruins. The enemy still maintained a presence. Tchaikovsky needed closer reconnaissance to determine enemy strength. At 16:05 hours, he reached a decision that would become the most audacious act of the entire Saipan campaign. 5 Marines would enter Garapan in broad daylight, conduct reconnaissance, return with intelligence. At 17:08 hours, everything changed. Devereaux spotted 5 bicycles leaning against a partially destroyed building. Japanese military bicycles, the type officers used for transportation between positions. An idea formed immediately. 5 bicycles, 5 Marines. They could conduct their reconnaissance while riding through town like Japanese soldiers moving between positions. In the chaos of Garapan, 5 men on bicycles would attract less attention than 5 men on foot trying to hide. The plan violated every standard reconnaissance procedure, but Tchaikovsky approved it instantly. This was why he had recruited criminals, men who thought differently, men who fought dirty. Tchaikovsky, Devereaux, Red Eddie, and Billy took the bicycles, removed identifying Marine gear. At 17:15 hours, they began riding through Garapan. They moved casually, not trying to hide, just 5 soldiers on bicycles navigating through ruins. Japanese troops were everywhere, hundreds of them, and the 5 Americans were riding right past them. At 17:22 hours, a Japanese officer waved at them. Devereaux felt his heart stop, but he lifted one hand from the handlebars, waved back. The officer turned away, kept walking, did not give them a second glance. At 17:29 hours, soldiers shouted something in Japanese. The Marines had no idea what was being said. They just nodded, gestured, kept riding. The soldiers laughed, continued their conversation, never suspected anything. But for 43 minutes, the 40 thieves rode through the enemy capital, mapping positions, counting troops, identifying supply dumps. They passed within yards of Japanese officers who never suspected, never questioned, never realized that 5 enemy combatants were cycling through their staging area. Devereaux's mind was screaming the entire time. One word of Japanese would expose them. One slip, one mistake. They were 5 Americans surrounded by thousands of enemies. If the Japanese realized there would be no escape, they would be torn apart before they made it 100 yards. But they kept riding, kept their faces neutral, kept acting like they belonged, and the Japanese never caught on. At 17:58 hours, they completed their circuit through Garapan, exited the town heading north, continued riding another mile before abandoning the bicycles and moving back into the jungle. The reconnaissance had provided detailed intelligence on enemy dispositions throughout Garapan. Red was grinning when they reached the rally point. "We just rode bicycles through the enemy capital." Eddie shook his head. "The Corps is never going to believe this." Tchaikovsky's response was simple. "Then we will not tell them. We will just give them the intelligence." If this story is keeping you hooked, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because we are just getting to the hardest part, the price these men paid for what they did. Over the next 3 weeks, the 40 Thieves continued similar missions. They mapped enemy positions throughout Saipan's interior, called in coordinates for artillery strikes, ambushed Japanese patrols, rescued wounded Marines. They operated in small teams, sometimes for days without contact with Marine units. They suffered from malaria, dysentery, heat exhaustion, tropical diseases that left them weak and feverish. They ran out of food and stole from Japanese supply dumps. They ran out of water and drank from contaminated streams. They learned to sleep in 2-hour shifts, always with one man awake, always ready to fight. They witnessed atrocities. At Marpy Point, they watched Japanese civilians forced to jump from cliffs rather than surrender. Hundreds of people, men, women, children, choosing death over American capture because their government had told them the Americans would torture them. The Marines watched helplessly, unable to stop it, unable to save them. They found wounded Marines used as bait for ambushes. Japanese soldiers would leave an injured American in the open, wait for rescue teams to approach, then open fire. The 40 Thieves learned to approach every wounded man with extreme caution. Sometimes they were too late. Sometimes the wounded Marine was already dead. Sometimes he died while they watched. Unable to help, they saw prisoners executed, hands tied, forced to kneel, bayoneted, or shot in the back of the head. The Japanese rarely took prisoners on Saipan. The 40 Thieves learned that if they were captured, they would not survive, so they fought harder, ran faster, hid better, did whatever it took to avoid capture. By July 9th, when Saipan was declared secure, the 40 Thieves had lost 12 men killed and 9 wounded. That represented a 52.5% casualty rate, below the 73% average for scout sniper units, but still devastating. The survivors were physically and mentally exhausted. Most had lost 30 to 40 pounds. Several had malaria fevers that would recur for years. All had seen things that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Billy Mancini survived his malaria, but he would have recurring fevers for the next 40 years. The disease never fully left his system. He returned to Chicago after the war, worked construction, raised a family, but every few months the fever would come back, sweating, shaking, delirious, remembering that cave, remembering the rescue, remembering the faces of friends who did not make it home. He died in 1989, outliving most of his fellow 40 Thieves, but never truly free from Saipan. Red Sullivan had nightmares about the cave infiltration for the rest of his life, dreams of being trapped in darkness, Japanese soldiers inches away, unable to move, unable to breathe. Devereaux carried the faces of the 7 men he killed in that first pillbox. He never forgot them, never stopped seeing them in his mind, 7 human beings who died because he pulled a trigger, but they had accomplished their mission. Marine commanders estimated the 40 Thieves' reconnaissance work had reduced overall Marine casualties by at least 15%, potentially saving 2,000 lives. The mathematics were clear: 12 dead to save 2,000. The trade was worth it. Except mathematics do not account for guilt, for nightmares, for the weight of 12 men's deaths on one officer's conscience. Tuchovsky wrote 12 letters to families, one for each man killed. The letter to Danny O'Brien's mother was among the hardest. Your son died doing what he believed was right. He was braver than men twice his age. I am sorry I could not bring him home, but his sacrifice saved hundreds of other mothers' sons. He never mentioned that Danny was 16. Let the mother believe her son had been legal age, old enough. It was a small mercy in an ocean of grief. The war ended, the survivors went home. Most struggled with what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, but in 1945 they just called it being shell-shocked or having bad nerves. The government did not provide treatment, did not acknowledge the psychological cost. The men were expected to return to civilian life and function normally. Most could not. Frank Tuchovsky became mayor of Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. He never spoke about the war. His wife knew he had nightmares, knew he would wake up screaming sometimes, but he never told her what he saw, what he did, what haunted him. He died in 2011, 66 years after the war ended. His son Joseph found a footlocker in the attic after the funeral. Inside were maps from Saipan, a list of 12 names, letters from Marines thanking Tuchovsky for saving their lives. He had never opened the letters, never read them. There was one journal entry, just one, written sometime in the 1950s. I led 40 men into hell. 28 came back. I see the 12 every night. They ask me why I lived, and they did not. I have no answer. I saved 2,000 Marines by sacrificing 12 of my own. The math says that is victory. Victory does not feel like this. Joseph Tuchovsky realized his father had carried that guilt for 66 years, never told anyone, never sought help, just lived with it until it killed him. Jack Devereaux returned to Louisiana, became a mechanic, but he struggled with alcohol. The nightmares were too much. The memories too vivid. He died in 1987 of liver failure. Never attended Marine reunions. Could not face the reminders. Patrick Red Sullivan went back to Boston, became a union organizer, fighting for dock workers like his father. He maintained sobriety, wrote letters to the families of fallen 40 Thieves every year, 53 years of letters until he died in 1998. His final letter to Danny O'Brien's mother said this: I write you every year to tell you Danny mattered. This is my 53rd letter. I am 73 now. Doctors say I will not make 74, so this is my last chance to tell you. Your boy saved my life, not just on Saipan, every day since. Because when I wanted to give up, I remembered a 16-year-old kid who lied about his age to protect his mother. If he could be that brave, I could survive one more day. Thank you for raising a hero. Eddie Kowalski went back to Chicago, could not maintain civilian employment, too aggressive, too confrontational. He worked construction. Died in 1963 in an accident on a job site. His widow said he never stopped having nightmares, would wake up screaming about tunnels and darkness. For 66 years, the story of the 40 Thieves remained largely unknown. No official citations. The missions had been classified. The survivors did not talk. The Marine Corps focused on heroic narratives, not criminal platoons. Then in 2011, Joseph Tarkovsky found his father's footlocker. He began researching, tracking down surviving families, uncovering classified mission reports. He realized his father had led one of the first elite special operations units in American history. The tactics the 40 Thieves developed became the foundation for Navy SEALs, for Marine Force reconnaissance, for modern special operations doctrine, small teams operating independently behind enemy lines, deep reconnaissance, unconventional tactics. Everything the 40 Thieves had done in 1944 became standard procedure for elite units. In 2015, the Marine Corps officially recognized the 40 Thieves' contribution, a ceremony at Quantico. Surviving families invited. The commandant gave a speech. In 1944, the Marine Corps gave 40 criminals a choice. They chose to fight. They created modern special operations. They saved 2,000 lives. They died forgotten. Today we remember. Medal of Honor posthumous to Frank Tarkovsky. Joseph accepted on behalf of his father. My father never told me he was a hero. He died believing he failed 12 men. I wish he had lived to see this, to know he did not fail, to know he mattered. The 40 Thieves proved that breaking rules saves lives. That individual initiative beats institutional bureaucracy, that sometimes the outcasts save everyone else. They stole supplies, stole enemy bicycles, stole victory from impossible odds. But the greatest thing they stole was their own redemption. They proved criminals could be heroes. They proved that America's strength is not our equipment or our numbers. It is our ability to think for ourselves and adapt. The Corps forgot them for 66 years. But their legacy lives on. Every SEAL, every Force Recon Marine, every special operator who thinks independently, fights dirty, and brings everyone home. They are the descendants of 40 criminals from a brig who became legends. If this story moved you, honor these men by sharing it. Like this video, subscribe for more forgotten history, and tell us in the comments. Do you know a veteran whose story deserves to be told? Because every forgotten hero deserves to be remembered. The 40 Thieves, criminals who became warriors, warriors who became legends, legends who were forgotten until now. Never forget.